All right, welcome, gentlemen. Excellent. Excited to meet you.
Excited to meet you too.
Yeah, lovely to meet you, Callie.
All right. Well, let's go around and do some introductions real quick. Peter, we'll start with you if you don't mind. Just kind of tell us who you are and what you do and why you're here.
Yeah, so my name is Peter Atkinson. I founded the Merry Beggars when I was in grad school at Columbia University in New York City, getting my MFA in acting. And then COVID hit, and we pivoted to doing audio dramas because theater wasn't happening. And they succeeded, and we merged with Relevant Radio, which is a national Catholic radio network that reaches around like 260 million people with over 200 radio stations, towers across the United States. And since we joined in 2021, and there's a whole story around the back around how we joined, but since we joined in 2021, we produced an audio drama series of A Christmas Carol, which has been really, really fun. We reached number 3 in Apple Fiction podcast charts 2 years in a row. So now the goal is to see if we can break into number 1. And then we did On the Night Train, which I saw someone shout out in the comments, which is super fun. That thing has legs. We have not marketed or advertised that thing for like 2 years, and people are still discovering it, which is hilarious. And then we've been doing the Saints podcast. So that started in last September. That thing has been insane. We have produced over 180 episodes of full cast audio dramas. By the end of this year, we'll have produced over 5,000 pages of original scripted dramas and worked with, at this point, over 600 or 700 actors, writers, directors, artists. And we've honestly, I'm just like trying to hang on because it's grown a lot faster than I would have ever planned it to have grown. The thing I like to say is I went to school for acting and now I'm a project manager. But it's all in God's hands. And yeah, so that's sort of what we're on now. Tomorrow we're gonna release Faustina. The next week St. Augustine, and it seems to never end. So that's it.
Awesome. Fantastic. I love hearing it. That's exciting. We're going to dive into all of that. Gary?
Yeah. So I run a creative agency called Coronation Media. Primarily, I talk about myself as a filmmaker, so that's like where I'm at. But one of the projects that we really loved and we started working on was this story of Saint George and the Dragon, a retelling. We like to say it's like if Saint George was a Disney prince, or if Saint George was in the world of Lord of the Rings, and but it was way too expensive to animate or produce it as a film, at least initially. So we were like, you know what? Let's just test it out. Let's see if people even like this story. And so we are like, oh, an audio drama will be easy. It was not easy. Peter, I can't fathom doing quite as many as
Well,
you do.
I don't run a creative agency, so I
Yeah,
get to just
whatever.
focus on the audio.
Whatever.
Yeah.
Yeah, but no, and Firebreaker, yeah. So we did Firebreaker. It took us 2 years to develop. Worked with a lot of great writers and great actors, and got a full orchestral score for it, which was crazy. And yeah, it's been really awesome.
Excellent. Nice. Let's see. From the chat, yeah, we're getting a lot of love for Merry Beggars, getting a lot of love for you guys down in the chat. Gary, do you have any volume control? It looks like it might be a little bit quiet.
How
Check
about
that.
now? Is that
There
better?
we go. Yeah.
It's
There we
these
go.
fancy mics. They're too
I
much
know.
trouble.
I know.
Stick
I'm
with
using
the
it.
AirPods.
Yeah. I'm using my old tried and true 2010 Mac, and the video quality is crap, but it works. All right. Well, my name is Callie Sioux, as I said earlier to you guys, and I am a musician and an author and filmmaker, mostly with music videos. And then I also just produced my first audio epic and drama called 1232, a time travel medieval fantasy adventure. It's a very big project for an indie. You guys understand that? Yes, kind of started in 2020 after I couldn't be on the road touring full time in the rock band I was in. And so it allowed me time to jump into this. I grew up loving and enjoying audio drama, radio theater, everything from The Shadow to Adventures in Odyssey to anything like that I could get my hands on. And then finally being able to produce my own project, did a Kickstarter for it. 1232 is 60 episodes. Each episode's 20 to 30 minutes. There's a 40-member cast. And it was all fully dramatized, full narration, and full sound design and full original score as well. So I'm with you guys in the trenches.
You guys are wild. Firebreaker is 11 episodes long. That's it.
Smart. You're just smart, Gary. We're not. No, just kidding. That's anyway. So it's been a lot
awesome.
of fun. But I love being able to talk to you guys about this. I feel like we're going to have a lot of fun shop talk. But let's kind of go into why we're creating this kind of content. Like, what has really inspired you, Peter, to, I know you've got your background in acting and obviously some radio, but what really inspired you to start doing like audio forward kinds of content?
Yeah, so the answer is really like uninspiring, which is COVID. Like COVID caused us to do audio dramas. Initially, I never thought we were going to do audio dramas. And so I founded the Merry Beggars. The whole mission was to like have an impact on the culture by creating a space where Catholic artists could create work in alignment with their, their worldview. Which, if that sounds like a convoluted mission statement, trust your gut. So COVID comes around and we launched this contest called the Quarantine Plays, and we offered $300 for a top prize if you could write a 10-minute audio drama, and we produce it. And we ended up getting over 120 responses, by far the largest amount of responses, with zero marketing, zero publicity. Basically, I just posted a few places online, and like 3 weeks start to finish submission window. So like, if you want a short course on like how not to run a contest, that was it. Not a lot of money, no time for advertising, no time for word of mouth. It was just like, great, let's go, let's see. COVID helped us out because everyone was on their computer. And we got this great response. We got a lot of people who were really interested in it. And that's when I realized that the way to actually accomplish our mission of affecting the culture, of changing the culture, was not actually by fundraising and throwing community events or doing stage readings or getting actors together to drink coffee and talk about how hard the industry is. The way to actually impact the culture was just to produce new work, was just to like pay artists. That was it. Like, that was the secret sauce, was to do the thing that no one else was doing, which is giving money to artists for their work. And that's why the Merry Beggars went from being this sort of ill-defined nonprofit to being a production company. And it just so happened that I had grown up, I have listened to many of the shows that you were mentioning, Callie, as well as like X-1, Radio Mystery Theater, CBS, like Gunsmoke, The Shadow, Dragnet, Dimension X, like Johnny Dollar, all of them. I've listened to thousands and thousands and thousands of them because I was homeschooled. And I taught myself stop motion animation. And I didn't know I was in a homeschooling conference.
Homeschool is the new
accident.
school,
Yeah.
man.
Oh, this is the common thread.
Yeah, this is the common
Okay.
But I taught myself stop motion animation, and you have to spend a lot of time moving tiny plasticine characters for like days on end to get like 5 minutes of footage. And so I just listened to thousands and thousands and thousands of these old radio shows, and I just fell in love with the medium. And so by the time COVID turned around or came around, and there was this opportunity to produce these audio shows, it turns out that my entire life up till then had given me, from the acting training to the audio experience to like my whole formation, lent itself to being in a position to where I could immediately go 0 to 60 and start producing these. And then it turned out to be the exact right medium at the right time. And then the reason that we stuck with it is I've had a lifelong love affair with audio dramas. I'm an Anglophile, so I grew up listening to like BBC4 radio dramas. I remember like sobbing on the couch listening to a BBC4 adaptation of Kidnapped, Robert Louis Stevenson. So it's like that has been a large part of my formation. And so that's one of the reasons I've stuck with it. The other reason is it's insanely cheap compared to film. As Gary mentioned, I'm able to produce 5,000 pages of scripts, which if that was film, like that would be, 50 years worth of filmography from like a 10, 20, 30, 40, $50 million production house at a minimum.
Mm-hmm.
And so the audio medium lends itself. This is another talk show, but I have a whole theory about the reason that a lot of Christian and Catholic artists aren't able to build really strong media careers is they don't have any place to get their reps in. They don't have any place to produce the bad work, the mediocre work, and like work through that stuff to get to the good stuff, which, you know, can take years upon years upon years. And so the thing with audio is like, we have one writer who has literally put herself through college because we've been paying her for her scripts for years now. And like, it's just insane. So like the ecosystem that you're able to create of these artists who are able not only to just create new work, but actually get it produced is amazing. So I love it for all those things. I love the audio medium as a medium. I love it for the economics of it. And then I love it because we're able to create a community of hundreds of artists who are getting paid, getting their works distributed in front of a national audience. And I remember early on when I was talking with our script consultant, Buzz McLaughlin, about compensation, because we do our best within our means to try and compensate people really well. And he was like, look, do the best you can. But for most of these writers, the most valuable thing that you're going to give them is the produced writing credit. The fact that after they work with you, they'll be able to say, not only have I written a full-length script, but it's gotten produced in national distribution. So anyways, that's why I'm so passionate about the medium, because I think it lays the foundation for a lot of super exciting things to come down the road.
Exactly. And I think, you know, being able to talk about that, where, you know, where can we kind of get our chops up? Where can we start at the bottom and work our way into the industry opportunities that are available within Christian businesses or businesses run by followers of Christ is lacking. And I think that, Gary, you have quite a bit of experience in the filmmaking. Go ahead and talk to us about that and kind of spin off of what Peter is saying here. Not only you stepping into doing the audio drama with Firebreaker, but what you've kind of learned being in the industry during this time.
Yeah, sure. So I think it's funny that we're all homeschooled freaks who this is where we've landed. Yeah, no, I mean, I started probably at the position where a lot of the people you're talking about, Peter, you know, where they're looking to find a way to get into the industry and storytelling and filmmaking, and they have Catholic ideals and they want to figure out how to make those things mesh. And so when I started my company, Coronation, with my wife and my business partner, Bill, 12 years ago, and our mission was similar, I think, to what you were talking about, Peter, and that we wanted to give people a livelihood to do this stuff and actually get a salary. And I mean, I don't really know how it all worked except for Providence, but we've built quite a bit and we've been going for 12 years now, and we have a big staff and it's been awesome. And we work for great clients, you know, Hallow and Exodus and a lot of the, you know, USDCB, a lot of the big Catholic organizations. And a lot of what we're doing is promotional storytelling or like documentary or things like that. But I mean, I was the homeschool kid who was watching Star Wars and rewinding it and watching it Star Wars again and trying to figure out the way to get Jesus and Star Wars together. I gave up Star Wars for Lent one time because I was concerned it was an idol. That was where I was at. And so, yeah, so it's all been towards storytelling. Firebreaker is like the beginning of our next sort of like phase of the company where we're doing a lot of stuff independently. But it's really with that idea of saying, hey, how can we take the best ideals of, you know, storytelling, but also as Catholics, how can we do that in a way that is, you know, appropriate or like gives life to the mission? And Firebreaker was just the first step there. We are doing a feature film next year. That's exciting. It's not fun and fantasy. There are no dragons, but we are doing it.
Excellent. Bravo. Yeah, I'd have to say that, you know, my mission with this is very much a passion project, but Rumble Stump Entertainment is our branch that my husband and I have started. And it's a little bit of a label. We've produced music with it, and it's also for the audio drama world and working with voice actors and things. But it's very much in its infancy, still very grassroots. But we've been so passionate about being able to help others, regardless of faith, honestly, and just being able to help others in the way that just we were not helped. Like my husband and I were both homeschooled. We grew up in, in the middle of nowhere, New Mexico. I grew up on a ranch. He grew up like long-haired skateboarder kid, and our families are very creative, entrepreneurial, all this kind of stuff. But there wasn't really anybody to like mentor us and come up and kind of give those opportunities like you're talking about, Peter, like work experience, pay people, be passionate about it. And it's so sad because I feel like the church has been doing that, or had been doing that for hundreds, thousands of years, to where, you had the monasteries funding everything within the village and paying the artists to come do the stained glass and pay the artists to come carve the, every little detail about it. The church was actually funding so much more art. And to see that change, I think we're now seeing the result. Is there's a lot of stories nobody's even relating to anymore because we've lost some foundation and some truth.
Well, and I want to touch on something you said, because I think Gary and I have talked about this a lot, which is we're all homeschooled, right? I'm sure we know that a lot of our friends have gone on to become teachers, right?
Yeah.
Because in the homeschooling realm, there's so many teachers as models. And there's in politics, they talk about like talent funnels or channels where it's like, oh, you have a model that can guide you down this career path. And one of the things that I had no idea what a producer did. Like, I had no idea that you could have entertainment or media be an even potential career option. Like, I thought like academia was the default and everything else was just like business and academia. That was like my bifurcation of the world. Yeah. And so one of the things that really excites me about what Coronation Media is doing and many other companies is that they're presenting a model of what a livelihood in media can look like. And you can make a living. You can buy a house. You can pay for, school. Like, you can actually earn a living in media. And I think that's super important. I know, Gary, you've talked about this as like an emerging market. And I think a big part of that, of building that emerging market, is creating the career role models for the next generation. And I think places like JPG, John Paul the Great Academy, and stuff like that is doing that.
I think it's so funny too, though, because like, I think we probably all, I'm just assuming, when we started this sort of like journey, we're thinking we are artists and we want to tell stories. And then all of a sudden you're a business owner and you're worried about project management.
Call with you and Bill talking about project management software.
And we stole our project management software from Peter Atkinson. He's great. But so I think it's pointing out the fact that there was no scaffolding. There was no scaffolding for any of us to tell stories, but there's a huge community of people who are desperately desiring these stories. And I don't resent the fact that I have to be a business owner in order to tell stories, but I certainly think it's interesting. And as I was talking to someone, I can't remember who it was, but in a similar space, and he was like, maybe we're just, setting this up so our grandkids can do the great, huge, beautiful things. And maybe that's true, right? And maybe we can go quicker, but I think that it's just interesting. I think, Callie, to your point, it's like the church has not put an emphasis on funding this sort of thing. We always talk about these things as like beauty as being the highest ideal and leading with beauty and all of these things, and we aren't dedicated to it. So I think it's interesting that the children of the resistance in the homeschool markets are coming to the conclusion that actually art is important.
Art is very important. Exactly. Well, in so many different types of Christian homes, Protestant or otherwise, like politics, military, academia. Like that's the most wholesome options you have as a follower of Christ, because that's where you're going to make great impact, and that's where you're going to make change. And that is true. Those are terrific vocations and callings, but we have definitely ignored the importance of being able to write these fantasy stories. And I'm in a lot of these different kind of fiction spaces of writers and writers conferences, and there's definitely not a shortage of incredible content and writers and imagination and sci-fi and fantasy, and everything is there. But we always get hung up on like, well, it's C.S. Lewis and Tolkien, and that's like it, and like we never make any room. And honestly, I get trapped in this a lot, because like in rock and roll, it's like, well, there's Led Zeppelin and there's everybody else from the 70s, and that's it. Like and people complain about there's no good new rock and roll. It's like, are you kidding? Have you not heard the Black Keys? You not know Rival Sons?
Yeah.
There's like incredible stuff in between.
Yeah.
But it takes, I think I love what you guys are kind of bringing out in this discussion, is it takes the business models and it takes kind of the more professional aspect. So for me, like the artistic side, I knew it was something I was always going to do. And then I ended up starting like managing restaurants and got heavily into what it meant to be an entrepreneur and a business owner. And so that's kind of, my husband and I were able to like start our music on that end and provide a living for ourselves. Now, a lot has changed since 2020, especially in the music industry, but new things are arising in the film and audio drama industry, though, to where we can start setting that up and hold the quality and the bar nice and high, because we actually can reach it,
Yeah.
So
I think that's awesome.
Nice. Yeah. And I think, filling the hole in the market too, with our little talk today is about telling epic stories of faith. Let's talk about some of that. What makes it up? What makes it epic? What makes a story epic to you guys?
Gary.
Oh man. Yeah, I mean, there's probably an academic answer that is accurate, but I'm just gonna, go for my gut. I think like I'm a big sucker for Hero's Journey. I'm a big sucker for Campbell, filtered through my Christian perspective. But I think what a story an epic story is something about heroic change where in a person's life, where archetypes are presented symbolically and maybe become embodied to some degree. I don't know if that, Peter, give me a better answer. Callie,
I don't know.
You give us a better answer.
I don't know if I have a better answer.
I'm gonna wait and Jerry pick from both of y'all.
So it's interesting. I've learned, because now we've worked with like hundreds and hundreds of scripts. I've learned like the adventure is key. It's core to the Merry Beggars brand. Like, I'm uninterested in pretty much any other story. We'll do some stories that, in the future that aren't as quite focused on adventure, but like the Christmas Carol, I love. It's super heightened. It's really intense. The breadth of it is really large. On the Night Train was this like train mystery adventure with sabotage and explosions from coast to coast. And then the Saints, the subtitle is The Saints: Adventures of Faith and Courage. And I think I agree with Gary's answer. To me, it just comes down to stakes. So any story is, I basically only have two tools in my story shaping toolbox. One is Aristotle's structure of inciting, incident, rising action, climax, falling action, denouement. And like that structure of a story of inciting, incident, rising action, climax, falling action, denouement needs to be present in everything that we do, from each episode of The Saints to the 5 episodes taken together to the 21 episodes of On the Night Train to each episode in On the Night Train to each scene in On the Night Train. And that anytime that is lost, the audience stops leaning in, because there's no forward momentum. Inside of that, the essence of story is conflict. And to me, an adventure is when the conflict is large enough that it's exciting. And that can be a spiritual adventure like A Christmas Carol, where the stakes of that, the conflict of that is, will Ebenezer be redeemed or not? It's his eternal soul. To On the Night Train, where the stakes and the breadth is coast to coast, the expanse of the country, possibly exploding trains, to each of the Saints trying to find that nugget. But to me, it comes down to the stakes of the story. In other words, what can be lost has to matter enough for the story to be exciting. And generally, just in terms of working with the stories, I find that tends to require a certain breadth of the story. So I don't really know how to explain this, but like the horizon of the story needs to be big. So it can't be about whether or not I'm going to be able to make buttered toast tomorrow morning, right? Like that's, even if I as a character really care about that, and even if the Coen brothers could somehow make that, a blockbuster, right, that's not a big enough breadth for it to be an adventure. For me, I sort of lean towards the like Robert Louis Stevenson classic literature adventure of, you know, Great Expectations or Kidnapped or Treasure Island, where it's just the size of the adventure that you said, that's a circular definition. I can't use it. The size of the
Quest.
scope of the adventure needs to be big enough, and the stakes need to be big enough for it to feel exciting. That to me is sort of what I come back to as I work on stories.
Definitely.
Gary, how'd I do?
It's pretty good, man.
That's good. That was good. Yeah, I think that's a big part of it. Scope, hero's journey. I think too, even just, I think of some things on the technical and back end side of what kind of story you're trying to tell. Spartacus, Ben-Hur, you know, and at what scale you're willing to go to tell it. And I think that is something that also makes it epic. So we have the content itself, the hero's journey, the adventure, the stakes, being able to follow a certain pattern. And then there is like, how many more people can we get involved in this project to make it happen? And I think that's
and I also agree too, Gary, something you said, which was, you talked about archetypes, and I would say the more that a story can touch upon sort of transcendent themes, the more it's likely to be an adventure. So we'll be working on stories, and it's like, it's an interesting story. There's lots of conflict. There's a lot of events. There's a clear character with a definition. But if we can tie it into a theme of justice or a theme of courage or a moral principle or something like that, that also brings it into the realm of adventure and size. That's really cool.
Yes, definitely. I hear that in both Firebreaker and Night Train and things like that. I think it's interesting how many times A Christmas Carol, I was noticing in the chat, everyone is like, it never gets old. Like, what an incredible journey. And I think it has so much to do with not only the elements that we're talking about, but also that spiritual influence. And this is a question that I had for y'all, and I'm going to segue into it, although we can kind of come back to talking about this if we want. But life balance in your own personal lives with the art and the amount of work that you do, and what you're kind of seeking spiritually, like being able to put in those kinds of meaningful stories for people to hear and listen to walk away with something, and, you know, some of the emotional balance that you're seeking, and then kind of some of that physical life balance that you're seeking. Talk to us about that on managing a business and creating content, because, you know, this is the real life thing that we all have to figure out. You know?
Well, I wake up at 7, and then after an hour of prayer, I go into a sauna where I do a 2-hour Swedish, and I don't think about anything. I don't have any thoughts for 2 hours straight. It's amazing. What about you, Gary?
Sounds dope. Oh man, no, I think if I was charting my life along the hero's journey right now, I'd be somewhere near the midpoint, and it would be the first reversal where everything's bad. No, I think like from a work life, spiritual life perspective, I think like my prayer life is basically the thing that's like keeping me all together, and it's basically like, you know, tossing literally sometimes Hail Marys, being like, hey, let me hold on. I think right now, like, I think basically there are seasons. Oh, my webcam shut off. But there are seasons where
can still hear you.
Things are more balanced, and seasons where you're being called to do something big, and you're being called to do something that's difficult. And I'm in one of those right now. I think getting all these things out. I mean, like literally, I just finished 8 pages on a screenplay right before I hopped on this call. So I don't have that right now. I'll get there. And this isn't like an advocation for like grind culture. It's just acknowledging where I'm at. So hopefully God will bail me out, and I'll try to fix my camera too.
Nice.
Yeah, I think if you're going to do entrepreneurship, you need to kiss work-life balance goodbye for a while. There's just no way around it. I don't think that you can start a company and work normal hours for a long period. So I think there's a reason why not everyone's an entrepreneur, and there's a reason why companies aren't started more often or succeed more often, which is that you have to be obsessive and you have to have other people pulling you back from work, because one of the things that you just enjoy the most is whatever work you're working on. Like that's just a fact of life. That said, I'm a big believer in constraints. So I try to get up. I have 2 kids. Gary, you have what, 4?
Yeah.
Something like that. Yeah. So it's the challenge level goes up as you have kids. I'm a few levels behind Gary right now. But I try to wake up like pretty early in the morning. Right now it hasn't been happening because one of my kids is just not sleeping through the night. And I'm getting over a cold that one of them gifted me with, which is delightful. But I leave work every day at 4 p.m. and I don't touch work on the weekends. And I've done that for a while. Part of that is because my wife is Puerto Rican, and I'm scared of Puerto Rican fire. I.e., my wife is really, really, really prioritizes family, and so that in combination with me really believing in the power of constraints, I just don't touch work after 4 p.m. and I don't touch work on the weekends. Now, I sometimes do on the weekends, a couple hours here. But one of the things that someone can relate to Puerto Rican fire, that's good.
Yeah.
One of the things that I believe is, if you can accomplish your goal without a team, it's too small of a goal. And oftentimes in my own life, I will get prideful and I'll get frustrated and I'll think so-and-so isn't doing it well enough. I'm just going to do it myself. And I'll find it difficult to delegate tasks. I'll find it difficult to let go of things. And one challenge that I always try and give myself is, do I really need to break the boundary? Do I really need to work super late? Do I really need to work on the weekends? Or do I just need to be really a lot more strategic around how I'm building my team and how I'm structuring the workflows internally and how I'm running my team? Now, that said, I'm able to get to this point after 3.5 years of building the Merry Beggars internally at Relevant Radio, where they're funding us. So we're basically like a funded startup inside of Relevant Radio. At the beginning, I was working 12, 13, 14-hour days every day, and I loved it. And now I just can't do those hours. Like, I think my body would just burn out. I can't do that right now, especially with the kids. But I try and reframe that as an opportunity to develop myself as a leader to the point where I can build a strong enough team that they can accomplish the mission without me having to burn myself out. And so that when I'm sort of coaching my team internally on the culture, and we don't do this as well as we need to, but I think we're probably about 80% of where I want us to be, maybe 70, is I tell them I believe in really strict work-life balance. I believe that your boss should not talk to you on the weekends, and I should not be slinging things to you at 5 p.m. expecting a reply back before the next business day. The reason I believe in that is because I want, when we do have a project that requires 15-hour days, for 3 weeks in a row, and we're all not going to see our families very much, or we're going to, be struggling with that. I want us to have the gas in our tanks to be able to do that. And I want a team that's so in love with their work that, like, I'm having to coach my employees to not work so much, to take the evenings off. And, praise God, we're there now, which is awesome. But it's evolving. I definitely agree with Gary. There's seasons to life, but the thing that I try to sort of challenge myself with whenever I'm breaking any boundary like that is, am I working really hard because this is just a season and I really need to put in the time? That's legitimate. Like, I'm actually entering one of those seasons now because I took on a few more responsibilities.
Sure.
Or is it the case that I need to actually grow as a leader and build the team and build the workflows and build the company to the point where it's sustainable in the long term?
Do you have it figured out, Callie? Have you figured out work?
Oh man, I wish. No. I don't have kiddos, so I don't have to deal with that as much. But I haven't yet. It's an interesting thing, I juggle a lot of different jobs, a lot of different things. For my project, it was crowdfunded, and then we were able to kind of continue going completely listener funded, I should say.
That's awesome.
So yeah, it is awesome.
That's really cool.
And so that kind of provided me the time and the space. But at the same time, still playing music. I manage social media and do different stuff for other bands. I still, I had a cleaning company for a while, and then I do a lot. I'm like juggling stuff kind of all the time. And like for me, the balance is more about saying no to more things and being more hyper focused, and I'm sure that's a little bit of a female thing too. We're used to, all of us can juggle as many different things, but as women in business and creative arts, we're tempted to really just like say yes to everything. And so I think that's, of course, everyone can be tempted for that, but learning how to say no, get hyper focused, and accomplish each goal. And I spend a lot of time trying to do like stints of work, and then like kind of sprint really hard and fast that hard season, and then I have to schedule like time off and a break, and I have to be very serious about my time off. Sometimes I can have that in a week, but usually it's several weeks of just like go, hustle. Then there's like, okay, I've got 3 days, I'm going hiking, I'm doing something else, and giving it a break. And then I love the idea of constraints in so many different ways of like, okay, can I be disciplined in this? But then I also like it when like, oh, somebody sent in some crappy audio and we can only use like this piece over here and that piece. How do we fix it? Oh, and then, like, let's talk about some of those kinds of balances that we've had to deal with in working with a bunch. So go ahead and tell folks, are you guys able to work in studio with your voice actors? Is it a studio you have control of? Is it a space you rent? Let's kind of talk a little bit about the process, and then kind of when things go wrong and we got to work in those limitations again.
I think we're going to have a completely different answers. I think we are going to have completely different answers.
When we worked with David Henry,
He's great. No, I think like, so we worked Firebreaker was about half and half. So we had a lot. The interesting thing about Firebreaker is we were going to start right when the SAG-AFTRA strike was happening, which was a big deal for a lot of actors in Hollywood, but what they could still do was podcasts. So what that did was it opened some availability for us to work with higher level talent than we were expecting to, right? So we worked with David Henry, who I've known for years, and he's a wonderful guy. And we worked with Elizabeth Tabish from The Chosen and some other, really great actors who have credits and, have a lot of clout. But then a lot of Firebreaker was like, I never had any credits, a lot of young people who were joining in, and some of that was done in studio, but a lot of it was done remote. We did it. Luckily, we were able to work with really good studios and make sure that we had all the dynamic link stuff set up so we could monitor things and make sure that we did it well. But it was like a completely sort of like, assembling it as we go. We had a great script, but like the workflow sort of like, it was our first audio thing. We have a lot of pipelines for animation. I have like a ton of animation pipelines and live action pipelines, but for audio, we were just like, hey, let's figure this out as we go.
Yeah. So for us, we merged with Relevant Radio in 2021. And part of the deal was I moved my family out to Chicago. So we live north of Chicago, and I go into the office every day in Lincolnshire, Illinois. We're about like an hour north of the city. And one of the things that's been really key to making all our growth possible is we have studios in person, and we're really close to one of the 3 major acting cities. So New York City, Chicago, LA, and then Washington, D.C. is a good theater city, but it's not nearly as big as the others. And what that has meant is I'm a really big believer in systems. And so from day one, we've been building up an internal database of we probably have over 1,500 actors in a database that are all mostly local, and we store all their auditions in there. We store their resumes, their headshots. So we have this like database of local actors that we can pull for any demo, age, whatever we need, which is awesome. And that's just like an asset that we built up over the years. But then, so I really try to record in person whenever possible. And when we were recording at Christmas Carol, it wasn't really obvious which direction we were going to go. And I had some people push me towards doing remote. And there are certain advantages with that because you can audition the world suddenly. So there's some really nice things that can happen with that. And as Gary said, when you're working with higher level talent, they tend to not want to go into a room with other people because their schedules are tight. They just want to go into a studio, record, be done with it. And what I really believed in from day one was getting the actors in a room together so that you can rehearse together, you can form performances off each other. And then quite frankly, I would not want to do my job if it was all remote. Like the fact that we get to have people in the flesh recording opposite each other really matters to me.
I should say too that like one of the best things is a good scene partner. So if you are doing remote, you have to have a good scene partner. So I didn't direct every episode. I was sort of like, we tried to do it like I was the showrunner on a TV show, doing writers' rooms and all that. But Jim Morlino, who's the director on the episodes, he is like an actor's actor. And so he was doing all of the reads with everyone in remote. And that's why I think the performances work. But if it wasn't for that, you know, the remote thing just wouldn't be feasible.
To your point, like we have incorporated remote recording into our workflow over time, specifically when we're doing saints or series that require like a very specific demographic. So like when we're doing Josephine Bakita or you're doing Isaac Jogues, and we want Native American actors and so on and so forth. We'll do remote records for that. So I think you can make both work, but the thing that made the decision for me about which type of recording process we were going to prioritize was just efficiency. So we have to ship about 75 minutes of finalized audio every week, and each series takes 10.75 months to put through the entire workflow from beginning to end. And so we have like 180 episodes in development at any one time. And so it's a lot faster if we can just get the actors into studio. We record all 5 episodes of The Saints in one day, and then they're out by 5 p.m. And so we just get them in, get them out. We have a whole system for that. And if we did that remote, it would take probably 3 or 4 or 5 times as long to do that. And so when we were recording on the night train, we recorded 6 weeks straight, 10-hour days, 40 actors, and we just flew the actors in that we needed. Like there were some actors we flew in from around the country, put them up in a hotel, record. They spent their summer with us, and otherwise it just wouldn't have been possible.
Yeah, that's great. I need some of that. Workflow spreadsheet stuff you got going on. I need some of that.
He's insane. He actually has helped change our company.
That's awesome.
ClickUp.com.
There you go.
ClickUp. We're on ClickUp now. It works.
We got to do some great connecting here. So with me, I had experience with various, kind of like we were talking a little bit earlier about varying different life experiences kind of lended itself to me being able to pursue this medium, but it's all very grassroots. We had a studio in South Central New Mexico where I'm from that a gentleman had bought and had turned into an Airbnb, but he hadn't taken any of the soundproofing down. And so he let us use that for free. And so we were able to clean it out. And it was an acoustic, very well made acoustic studio, and for acoustic music, a musician of some kind that used to live there. So we were able to use that, but then I had to do a ton of remote because I lived very remote. I'm 3 hours from any major airport. So, and everyone's kind of coming off the pandemic. And so anybody who recorded remotely were already professionals who had their own studio and their setup, and I knew I could trust them on sending that in. And then the majority if not all of the amateurs, I was able to bring in and work with in studio. So we were able to kind of make a compromise there and figure out a way in which we could keep things fairly consistent. And then, we had to outsource quite a bit. I don't know if you guys have heard of Eternal Future Productions. They're also a wonderful audio drama company. They do like Robin Hood and a bunch of fun medieval stuff as well. So
That's awesome.
I got connected to that community through, it's kind of like lots of folks who are from the Adventures in Odyssey pipeline have a bunch of their own independent companies. So a lot of these people worked with them.
That's
and so I was able to pull in those voice actors, Eric Basil, JD Sutter, and and a bunch of others to kind of come in and do bit roles here and there. And then I was able to work with a few folks, via Zoom. But honestly, like, we were doing so much content because we didn't adapt the book to be an audio drama. We didn't adapt the book to be any kind of theater, radio play. We just left it as is. So we kept the narration, added in the dramatization, and then balancing the sound effects the way I wanted. Because sometimes audio dramas sound like you're listening to a movie in another room, and it's kind of distracting, and like the sound effects are placed in odd places, or there's like way too many footsteps. And, and a little premature on certain sound effects. And so I really wanted to take my experience with producing albums and place things like I would, with a drum track and vocals and harmonies. And so I was constantly kind of casting people according to their vocal tones. That's and cool. Who was professional and who was super amateur, so we could get them to kind of play off scenes with each other, because I couldn't afford to be, and I didn't know anybody. Now I know so many more, and that I could definitely utilize. But at the time I was just like, who can do this? Who wants to do this? And it's been fun to introduce a lot of people, a lot of New Mexico film actors into doing voice work now. So a lot of people have kind of transitioned into that. But it's interesting. I can't wait for the time that I get to have like a cast in a room. Like, that's like my dream. Like, I got to do that with 2 actors towards the end of the 2nd season, which is in production, but where I was able to have them play off each other. But that's so fun. I love all of that because the collaboration is still what's so important to me. That's one of my favorite things about art. All right, guys, throw your questions in the chat. If you have any questions about anything that we've talked about, work-life balance, the process, some tech, any questions with these guys on the stories? Okay, we got some questions here. Thank you, Zephyr. Yes, 1232 has narration. Exactly. It kind of keeps you grounded in not going off too far, and you can remember who's talking, because at first it can be challenging. All right, Catherine asks, for anyone looking to start podcasting, what software would you recommend? Software and hardware. Okay, we can get into this conversation here. So I actually have a little bit of a tech sheet that I drew up for all of my voice actors who are remote, and be like, please have these kinds of microphones and things. We used a varying, as we were starting out, and because we're musicians, we use like Logic Pro for a lot of our voice recording. But you guys are deeper and many years into, so what do you guys got for some software recommends?
We just use GarageBand for everything.
Well, I did start off using GarageBand for a long time.
I feel like that kind of has to be the answer, though, right? Is like, because the truth is, like, it is any number of variations of software would work, at this point. And microphones are so, like, there are like scale, any real voice person will know that there's like better microphones and not so good microphones. But like, I think having a decent microphone and like almost any audio software would work. I think like, I'm an Adobe guy, so I like Audition, but I think I think some of the cuts that they were putting together, the director, when he was doing like timing cuts and things like that, he was putting them together in Premiere, which I would never do, but that's what he was doing. And then, and just because what he knew, it's what works for you. And then I think we did final ours in Pro Tools is what we finaled it in for all the sound mix and everything.
Yeah. I'm just going to read off a couple things for people looking for some very specific kind of details. So a pop filter, which is something that if you're doing a podcast, Gary's got a sock on the microphone there that you'll see. That's important for catching plosives if you're doing any of that. A dynamic cardioid microphone. When you look into what kind of microphones, they all have a different, which now microphones are, the game's changing, so this information is almost outdated with how AI is being used to create microphones. But an isolation booth, meaning no refrigerator noise, you got to turn off the AC, which always is a pain. And then, headphones that are isolating. You don't want to just use any old headphones. You need to, so you don't hear any other kind of playback, and no room noise. You want like the floor as dead as possible. You don't hear that because some voice actors got to tap their foot or I wear a lot of rings, so I have to like speak in the microphone like this so I'm not clanking. You're going to record in 24-bit, which you can look up some research on that. You're looking to record in WAV files, which is the broadest amount of information we can squeeze in the audio. There's all kinds of things like that you do need to learn to communicate with others and to also record good, clean audio, even for a podcast. And that's how we keep the bar raised, right, guys? Is that people do their due diligence, buy a good microphone.
Yeah.
Get a good.
That's probably like the most expensive part is like the microphone and then the any interface you need. Because most of the microphones aren't they're not USB, so you have to like feed them through an interface.
Yeah.
But
in terms of that, my favorite. So if the question is about podcasting versus voice acting, I think in terms of podcasting, the most important thing is stop focusing on the equipment and just start. Joe Rogan started on a webcam in a garage. And now he got like however hundreds of millions of dollars his deal is. So with podcasting, it's all about the relationship. So you just have to start. And then you can set milestones for yourself of like, oh, once I get 100 downloads a week, then I'll buy myself a microphone. Or once I get, XYZ, that's helpful as sort of a motivation. One of my favorite pieces of tech that I bought was a Rodecaster Pro, which is just like so fun. And it makes... when you're doing podcast production and you're just doing like quick and dirty daily podcasts or whatever, it makes it so much fun. And then
cosign that one.
Yeah,
it's
Rodecaster
awesome.
Pros are really fun. And then the two pieces of terminology that I wish someone had explained to me when I started, and I had no idea what they were, is a DAW, D-A-W,
Yes, yeah.
and what XLR means. And DAW, I see you're nodding in agreement, right? DAW, it does stand for Digital Audio Workspace. So when you're Googling around what you're looking for, the type of software you're looking for, whether it's GarageBand, Audacity, Logic Pro, Audition, whatever it is, there's so many of those. They're all called DAWs. You can Google like best DAWs. XLR is when a microphone is not a USB, it's an XLR type of microphone. So Gary is holding up that, and that is an XLR connection. And if you've ever bumped into a guy dressed in all black and he's messing with wires, chances are he's an audio engineer trying to figure out XLR connections. So if you wanted to get started with like a super duper mic, you would need an XLR cable, XLR interface that then goes into your computer via USB-C or USB. And then there's so many variations on that that all of them work.
Yeah, exactly. This is a good question, guys. We got answers for days on that one.
And Buzzsprout is like the easiest online software to start podcasting with. I don't use it anymore, but when I started,
exactly. Yeah, there's a lot of thousands of hours there. Okay, so let's see. For anyone, here's a question from Gianna. For anyone who is really talented at doing voice talent, what advice do you have for them to get their foot into the industry and get noticed?
Talk to Gary, convince Gary to hire you, and then there you go.
You hire way more audio actors.
Yeah, I've got a bunch of different projects in the works. And speaking of, if you go to the vendors or the Merlin Hall, I'm in the Merlin Hall. I am taking submissions right now. I'm giving one audio epic away for free, a short story that you have with at least 2 characters. You can go submit and talk to me about that later, which that is the event that's coming up next. Is the vendor hall will be open. We have great authors popping in who've been releasing books, so on and so forth. So go ahead and do that. And yeah, like us right here, you want to get started? Just record yourself. Can you do a Gandalf voice? What voices can you do? Grab your phone and make some recordings, and let's hear what you got.
Where do you guys post auditions? Like, where do you post them in the wild? Or do you just scour the internet for people?
Actors Access, backstage.com.
Yeah, we use Backstage a lot.
There's a bunch. If you haven't used Actors Access and Breakdown Express, use them. Those are where the good actors are. Backstage.com, the barrier to entry there is a little bit too low. And so you'll get actors who are like, oh, interested in it, but they're not really committed career-wise. And so we love Actors Access.
It is. I do want to say it is voice talents right now. It is a tough industry to get in.
Gosh, yeah.
It's incredibly saturated. There's a lot of people. I think there's literally probably not a day that goes by without I have like 50 different emails or something of people saying they're voice actors. And AI is the big evil monster that's coming to consume all of that. And that is a tricky time. Like, it's not for the faint of heart, but if you're really passionate about it, you should go for it.
Well, the other thing too is I went to school for acting. I was off Broadway. I was pursuing and laying a foundation for an acting career. And I'm doing what I'm doing now because, one, it's almost impossible to raise a family as an actor. Like, there's just no way I'd be able to support myself or my family. My advice, and actually this advice comes from Kevin Collins, our casting director and now creative producer. He says, especially if you're a Christian and your values don't align with Hollywood values, get yourself into a decision-making role as soon as possible. As an actor, you're almost always going to be handed a script that you didn't write or have any input on. And your talent is finding your way into the script and bringing it to life in a way that feels authentic and grounded and true. But if you want more control over your career, get yourself into a decision-making role. That can be as a writer, as a producer, as a collaborator. So you can be an actor, but like you're actively collaborating to shape the story. Like it sounds like Jim Arlino was in Firebreaker. So it's very hard if you just are a voice actor and you don't want to do anything else besides voice acting. It's a lot easier if you, like Callie has done, like Gary's done, like I've done, create a project with friends that you trust and get it out there. And then people like 100%. Me and Gary will see that and say like, oh, so-and-so can act. This is awesome. I want to work with them.
Yeah, that's really the only way. The only way is starting with friends. Like, I think like there was someone in Hollywood who I'm, stealing this from. But he basically was like, don't try to work with people who are above you. Try to work with people who are parallel to you so you can come up together. And every one of my most valuable relationships I've had, like in this, has been people where we're trying to do these things together. And whether that's other writers or whether that's, other filmmakers or anything like that, like it's always like, you help me out, I'll help you out, and we'll try to grow and do this together. And then from there, oh, look at this voice actor has like, 10 different things they worked on. Oh, they're a serious voice actor. Oh, well, then someone might hire you.
And I will also say the most important thing is to get a body of work. If you, as a creative, like you need to build a body of work that people can look at and evaluate you on. And the writer who now has written more for us than almost anyone else, and we paid her more than almost anyone else, it started by me talking to her and saying, hey, I want to create a children's show. Pitch me 15 different ideas. And there was no talk of money. I didn't have any money. And so it's just like, all right, great, let's do this. She pitched me 15 ideas. I said, all right, these 10 aren't great. These 5 are good. Can you develop these into like paragraph treatments? So we went back and forth, and eventually we landed on the Night Train. We were writing that it took a year and a half to write those episodes. I mean, most of that development time, we had no money. And then eventually the money came in and I was able to pay her and whatnot. But oftentimes those ideas that you really believe in and you develop, they can turn into foundations for careers.
Yeah, exactly. I mean, it was 14 years for me working on this story. I was doing other things, but for it to circle around, and then it all stemmed from my friends. I've been traveling the U.S. and Europe for a decade, and I thankfully knew a lot of entertainers who were looking for work during
Yeah.
after the pandemic. But then they led me to even more professionals. So networking is such a huge thing. Like, please keep going to cons like this when you can. Of course, there's, reaching out to different groups on the socials, but honestly, being able to come and ask people questions like this, and yes, begin your body of work, take the leap. You're going to be fine. Even if nobody sees it and it's not very good at first, it's okay. You'll do the next one. That's part of the process. All right, guys, let's see here. Any other questions from the chat? We have dropped all of the links for our different series, our different shows, our websites, and it looks like, Peter, you put through in some auditions. I threw my submit your story to us here, and Gary's got his as well. So if you guys have any questions, I personally, like I was talking about earlier, some of my motivation for this is the collaboration and working alongside people that there wasn't a lot of people willing to take risks on me in the entertainment business when I started. And so I love being that risk taker with you. So if you're somebody who's like, hey, I think I'm really good at this, email me. I'll check it out. I'll give you an honest opinion, but I promise to respond. And that's one thing that as Christian creatives, as people who are in the industry, that we can actually make probably the biggest difference. I don't know if you guys feel about this, but answer some damn emails. I know we're all busy and we get all this stuff, but as somebody who's done nothing but do inquiry, booking, just yes or no, or maybe later. But that is something we can do as creatives to just be that kindness that we're looking for,
So one question I have for both of you, because I think this
Yeah.
matters a lot when you're trying to produce original work. How did you guys get the funds to produce your work? So how did you fundraise? It sounded like, Callie, you went the Kickstarter crowdfunding route.
Yep.
What was that like for you?
It was great. It was something that I didn't really plan on doing. My whole family was pretty against it. Like I said, I come from ranchers, and it's like, if you can't make it yourself, then you definitely don't ask other people for money.
Mm-hmm.
And I had worked on a bunch of Kickstarters with some other musician friends of mine over the years who did well. And I prayed about it a lot. And the Lord just kind of opened the door, to be honest. And I was like, actually, I have a lot to offer people. So 1232, my story started as a film script. We made a short film. We took it to the homeschool convention in Albuquerque many years ago, and 14 years ago. And people were very inspired to start making films as a bunch of Christian homeschool kids. And then I had this kind of backstory. So I had props. I had pictures, I had video, I had a bunch of stuff that had just been sitting there before the internet was a thing that I could be delivering in a Kickstarter. So there's a lot of depth to the project there. Then I had some incredible talent who agreed to do it on an indie budget. Everybody got paid in my production, whether it was gas money to come or whatever, but it was indie rates. And so I went ahead, started the Kickstarter, ended up delaying it, and then but it's like 30 days of a very hard job. I read a terrific book, which I will write in the chat, but if you don't read this book 3 times, do not do a Kickstarter. It's called Crowdfunding for the Other 99%. And that book itself really taught me how to work up the pitch, exactly what my motivations and intentions were, exactly how to ask people for money, basically, like, hey, would you like to donate to this production? Gave me a full deal. I had to read it several times to get it right. We raised over 20 grand. It was amazing. But it was like some of the hardest days of my life and very intense. So if you don't like pressure, I don't know, or if you thrive under pressure, like I tend to do, that's how I did it.
Way back in yesteryear, I did a Kickstarter that we posted and we didn't do anything else. It failed, obviously. And but yeah, it sounds like Kickstarter is just a full-time job. Like as soon as you start it, it is a full-time job. The way I funded things in a bunch of ways. So my answer now is probably really boring to anyone who doesn't have a company, but it's like
Yeah.
using the company to fund the thing. But like when I didn't have access to funds, I was doing the same thing, which is whatever money I had. I did a feature film when I was 18, you know, like, and it was just, it cost nothing. I had nothing, but we'd put whatever it is, you know, a few $100s in to do it, you know. And then from there, it's just we've done little other things, you know, where we're taking a little bit of what we make as a company and putting it in Firebreaker. So it's like, it's a boring answer, but it was like our company's 12 years old. You know, we were able to cash flow it, thank God. And which meant that, you know, we had full creative control and we weren't answering
awesome.
to anybody, which was really exciting.
That's great. Yeah, cool. Peter, what about you?
I fundraised. So before I went to Columbia University, I got accepted in Columbia into their MFA program. And then I talked to a friend of mine in DC, and I said, there's no way I can go to Columbia. I can't afford Columbia. This makes no sense. I'm just going to like get a job as a speechwriter in politics or something. And she said, wait a second, you got into Columbia? You're going to Columbia. We're figuring this out. And so because she really believed in the need for Catholics in the entertainment industry. And so she said, look, you're going to Columbia. We're going to figure it out. And I got connected to this guy who taught me fundraising. His name is Taryn Bragdon. He runs a company called 7-Figure Fundraising. They have a great podcast. And they basically taught me soup to nuts how to fundraise, how to pitch people for 5-6 figure gifts, and the whole process, the whole system behind that. And so I had
What's the book called again? What is it
called? 7-Figure Fundraising. It's
Cool.
I don't think they have a book, but they have a podcast.
Got it.
They have an online course, and they have a website and whatnot. And that was my full-time job. And now he was on my board when I founded the 501c3 of the Merry Beggars. But I went to Columbia University. I fundraised my way through grad school while I was founding the Merry Beggars. And every Thanksgiving break, every Christmas break, every summer, I was taking flights to Florida, DC, wherever, to just meet with potential donors, pitch them on, you know, coming out of the ground level of the Merry Beggars. And I love fundraising. It is the most adrenaline pumping, nerve wracking thing I've ever done in my entire life. And I've performed on stage for a lot of people.
Mm-hmm.
Fundraising is performing for an audience of one. It's a storytelling exercise, and it is, it's an art form. I still love it to this day. I was just doing it earlier this year, and we've come a long way since then. So Father Rocky, who's the CEO of Relevant Radio, his pitch to me coming on to Relevant Radio was, hey, Peter, how much time are you spending on administrative stuff? And I was like, well, like 80% of my time is spent administrative and 20% is trying to like get the mission going, just as a bad recipe. And he said, well, how would you feel if 100% of your time was on creative and we took care of all of the back end office? And so I was like, that sounds great. This sounds like a great deal. So we signed a 3-year contract, and my only mission in Relevant Radio was just produce content. So that's where Christmas Carol on the Night Train, the Saints came from.
Cool.
And then the contract came up in March, and he said, look, you need to go raise a bunch of money if we're going to keep doing this, and we're going to do a 1-day pledge drive on Relevant Radio. And we had some private donors who were willing to put up like some really significant gifts. And because we had this body of work, we were able to go on air, and it was totally providence and the intercession of St. Joseph. On St. Joseph Feast Day, March 19th, I pitched for 12 hours straight on air, which set the record for pitching in Relevant Radio history. And we raised over $500,000 from, I think, over 3,500 individual donors coast to coast. Wow. It was one of the craziest experiences of my life. And it was total providence, total St. Joseph intercession. At the very beginning, so this was like my whole career coming to a judgment day. That's what Father Rocky called it, judgment day. And it was like everything was going to win or fail based on this one day. And so I get in early into studio. We start pitching 6 a.m. We have a little dashboard on our computers that that says like when gifts are coming in. And so we're coming in, and
and I'm pitching my little heart out, and nothing's happening. Not a single donation is coming in. During breaks, the other hosts are being like, "We didn't have enough time. This isn't working. What's happening?" And like for 20 minutes, not a single gift is coming in. So it's like, all right, this is it. And I had to make this interior act of surrender where I was like, all right, God, I don't know what's going to happen. I've been at this for 7 years, and I'm going to give this over to you. If this day is a success, it's a success. If it's a failure, I'm going to be faithful to the very end and just give it over to God, and what God wants to do with it, he'll do with it whatever he wants. So I'm suddenly like pitching even more, doing it, and just like, all right, this is the end, but like I'm gonna be faithful to the end by through St. Joseph. And then I get an email from the CFO that says, sorry, there's been a glitch in the dashboard, everything's going gangbusters, keep at it. And so I was like, all right, cool. So that was a little like that was a little test at the end, where it's just like, all right, it is not in my hands. And that's what I found with fundraising. What I found with all this stuff is we have to bust our butts to do the best work we possibly can. And then ultimately it's God that's going to take us over the finish line or not. Like that's it.
That's the guy who runs the Chosen Dallas. It's the 5 loaves and 2 fish thing.
Yeah.
And then
Totally
God is going to multiply or not multiply. That's on him, but you have to provide what you can.
And sometimes he doesn't multiply it, and he moves you in a different direction, and you learn new skills. And then sometimes he does it out of the
Dallas Jenkins
out of the blue.
was not having anything multiplied until The Chosen. I mean, he was producing bomb after bomb. His movies weren't doing right, and he just stayed faithful. And now look at him. Like,
I mean, I had tried to do crowdfunding situations before with our own band and our project, and they were okay. They weren't entire failures, but they weren't great. And being able to do this one, it actually was funded on day 2 of the 30-day campaign by a gentleman who I barely met, to be honest. Like we'd play a house concert for him once many years before, but I wasn't in communication with him. And he was just like, look, my church and I are just looking for more opportunities to uplift Christian creatives, because we see that this is a need. And and I think The Chosen has actually opened up a lot of doors for all of us in that vein. As far as popularity goes, the doors are already open. We've all already been working on it, but the popularity and the idea that the church can get behind creative pursuits in a very wholesome way and not in kind of this moochionary sort of way is interesting, and it's a very fascinating deal. Do either of you guys? I don't remember seeing. Do you have like Patreons or monthly subscriber bases?
I don't. There's a donate button on Firebreaker,
right? Yeah,
but like no, no.
Yeah.
But you do, and it's working.
Yeah. Well, I mean, I have. It's kind of trickling along. It's not really becoming something. I think it's just time of building up. The show has done really well. We've actually done way better than I thought we would. And I was able to get sponsors. So I released it episodically, like a podcast. And so I sold advertisement slots for the first season. And right now we're kind of on, first season's already out. That's 31 episodes. Next season is 30 episodes as well. But we're in the midst of talking. It's lots of negotiations going on.
I would
production.
love to pick both of your brains, because we really want to do season 2. And I have to figure that
out. We have got, we are 12 minutes over time, and I could tell we could probably keep going on this. If there are no further questions, we have each other's emails. We're going to continue this conversation. Because, picking some brains would be great. Any other questions, you guys? Any other things you'd like to say? Or anything? Some claps? Well, thank you. Thank you guys
for
tuning
listening, everybody.
in.
Yeah, this was fun.
We really appreciate it.
Great job moderating, Callie.
Oh, yeah. Thank you. Nice. All right, guys. Well, I think we're going to go ahead and end this so that everyone can hop on over to the vendor hall. Fellas, let's stay in touch. I actually do have some casting needs for the next season, and so I'd love to hit you guys up for that. But thank you, everybody. I'm going to